Okay, I'm Ross Walkup from Venice, Florida, and this is a 1909 Stanley Steamer Mountain Wagon, Model Z. These were mainly built for the Stanley brothers that had the hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. They needed a vehicle to haul their customers at the hotel from the train station in Loveland up the mountain to their big hotel in Estes Park. And these were made for that. They worked very well because you had full torque at no RPMs, you had no gears to shift, and it was just a perfect vehicle for that. And give you a little bit about how it works. The motor is down on directly on the rear axle. And okay, this is the motor you can see down in here. The little compartment in the front here is the cylinders. There's two cylinders, and they work both forward and backwards. You get pressure on both ways. So you get basically the same number of strokes in a revolution that you would with a 8-cylinder internal combustion engine, or as the Stanleys call them, internal explosion engines. The big case in the back is where all the gearing and the crossheads and all that is, and it's geared directly to the rear axle there. The rod coming up the side here runs up to your pumps, which pumps your water and your fuel and your lubricating oil to the engine while you're driving. Okay, this is how your main control here is your steam throttle. When you open this up, it lets the steam come out of the boiler, go through a superheater, which is right over the fire to make it superheated steam, and it goes back to the engine. So that controls how you go. This little lever here turns your water pumps on and off. It has an automatic feed on it, but if you want to put extra water in it, you can just turn this on and off. The little light here is very important because it's a little kerosene lamp. It's hard to drive a steam car if you can't see how much pressure you have and your pressure on your fuel and all these other things. So that's what this little lamp is for. It's your dash lamp. It really is a dash lamp. It lamps up the dash. This is your emergency brake or parking brake here if you're going to stop the car. The speedometer here drives off of a little gear on the front wheel. Okay, you're looking now at the little speedometer drive gear, and that runs to a cable that comes up to the speedometer here, mounted on the dash. Of course, the horn is right there, your city horn. You also have a cable here that hooks up to a steam whistle. Okay, the next things here are our gauges. They're some of the most important things here. This tells you how much steam is. You normally run between 500 and 600 pounds of steam. When it has an automatic control, when it gets to 600 pounds, it turns the fuel off to the burner and it lets the fire die out. The pilot light stays on, however, so then when you use some steam and it drops down to approximately 550 pounds or so, it will automatically turn the fire back on. The other gauge, big gauge here, is your fuel pressure gauge. You have to have the fuel under pressure to shoot it up into the burner, and it turns it from a liquid. It goes right through a tube right over the fire that turns it from a liquid fuel into a vaporized fuel and shoots that up into the burner. This is your main fuel valve right here. This one here in the middle is your pilot valve. And this valve over here, when you're starting from a cold start, the pilot fuel is gasoline, which vaporizes a lot easier than the either kerosene or diesel gas mix that we burn in the car. And so you start it on gasoline, and as soon as the main fire gets burning good and will vaporize the heavier fuel, then you can turn on this valve here and it makes the heavier fuel come on. This other valve here just puts air to your pressure tank for your pilot fuel. The two bottles here were a patent that Stanley had that the White company wanted very badly and tried to buy, but they wouldn't sell it to them. The fuel, rather than having to pressurize the whole big fuel tank like White did, they would pump the fuel from the pumps that we saw earlier on the drive down underneath, would pump the main fuel into these little tanks, so you only had a small amount of fuel under any pressure, and it was just made it a lot safer that way. This valve here just lets air into here to pressurize the tanks. Well, the pedals here, the right-hand pedal is just a regular brake pedal like you would have in a modern car. The other pedal here is your forward and reverse. Since there's no transmission and the engine is directly hooked to the rear axle, to reverse the engine, you mash the pedal all the way to the floor, and that changes the valve timing so that now the engine will run backwards. When you let it out to start, you let it all the way out, and when you get to moving a little bit, you lock this all one down like that, and that's what they call a cutoff pedal. It saves steam by not letting steam go the full stroke. It will let the steam do its job and expand in the cylinder so you don't have to use so much steam each stroke. Okay, the big lever here is the hand pump. When you're starting the car, you have to hand pump the fuel like this to get the fuel pressure in it. Once the car is going, all that is automatic, and you can actually take the lever out, handle out, and just store it down here out of your way. And as long as you're running the car on a regular basis, you won't need to use that anymore. Okay, your water tank is under the front seat. You just lift up the seat, you lift up the little lever, and you can pour it in with a bucket or a hose, either one, in this tank. This particular car has a second water tank under the second seat. So you can go about a mile per gallon, and so they're both about 30-gallon tanks. So you could, in this particular car, you can go about 60 miles between fillings. Okay, back in the early days, there were very few places except some of the bigger cities that had running water. So most of the time, you had to get the water and either pour it in with a bucket. But the easiest way to get it in was to use a siphon hose. This is a hose here, and on the other side of the car, there's a little fitting, and you can hook it to the hose and drop the little strainer here. This is to keep from pumping up fish or frogs or dirt or something. And you would throw it in a stream or a lake and open a valve that would shoot steam like a spray gun, and it would create a vacuum siphon and would actually fill the tank up without having to pump water or anything. It was actually quicker to fill it that way than it is most water hoses, unless you have really high pressure. And it only takes a few seconds, and you can pump water probably 20 feet or more in height and probably 100 feet laterally if you need to. It's a very good way to do it, and that's how most of the time they pumped their water back then. They would either stop beside a stream or a creek or a water trough for horses, because there were a lot of horses in those days. And like I say, there was very few places that you could get pressurized water to fill your tank the way we do today. Okay, next we're going to show you where the boiler is, how you make the steam. This is a steam boiler, and we just pop it up here like that. If you look down inside of here, you can see about 1,000 little tubes down inside the burner there, and this is called a Firetube Boiler. That is because the fire is down underneath in the burner. We'll see in a minute. It rises, the heat rises up through the tubes, and the water is all the way surrounding the tubes. There are other types of boilers, like a water tube boiler, but well, this is just what the Stanley used, and it was a very good system used for many years. Underneath the boiler is your burner. This takes your fuel, which is normally kerosene or the diesel gas mix, and this tube here is about 10 foot long inside there right over the fire, and the raw fuel comes in the back, goes through the tube over the fire, and turns from a liquid fuel into a vaporized fuel, and is shot out these little jets here and here into that Venturi tube, where it carries the air with it, and the heat makes a draft, and it pulls the air and the fuel up through the thing and lights it on fire on top of a grate, which is sitting back here, that has probably 2,000 or 3,000 little teeny holes in it. And the theory behind that is kind of like a burner on a gas stove, that the fire cannot go back down through the little holes. In the evenings, when you stop the car down, all the sediment in the water, the minerals and stuff, all you're taking off is pure steamed water, vaporized water. So all the minerals get heavy in the bottom of the tank, and to clear them out, you just open these little valves, and there's 4 of those valves placed around the boiler, and you let the water shoot out there as a vapor, and it carries all the heavy minerals and stuff out of your boiler so that it cleans the bottom of your boiler out.
Can you suck water up out of the lake?
Yes, correct. One of the simplest, easiest early cars to drive, because you don't have any clutch or any gears to shift. You just open the throttle and away we go. And we take right off. People ask me if it's a hard car to drive, and I say no, it's probably the easiest. It's a hard car to operate, because you have to keep up with everything. And it takes right off pretty good.